Hi, good evening. We're going to give everybody just a few minutes to jump on, and then we'll get the interview started.
I feel like with these lives too, Facebook always picks like the most awkward like freeze frame to be your little preview.
Usually does.
Yeah.
Usually does.
Whatever is the goofiest face that you make.
It's up here so I can see questions.
There we are.
There we are. Hi, I'm Amber Wakefield. I'm with the 5770 Task Force. It's a group in Effingham, and our mission is to educate the community for the purpose of spotting, reporting, and ultimately eliminating human trafficking, starting in Effingham County, one person at a time. We're here for our local service and resource spotlight. We've been doing a few of these interviews with different agencies in our area in hopes that we can share what you guys do, get the word out. A lot of questions of like, how does this work? Who do we call if we suspect something or if we worry about something? And so today I'm with the Children's Advocacy Center of East Central Illinois in Charleston. I'm with Robin Carr. She's the senior forensic interviewer. That is a mouthful.
It's a mouthful.
It's a mouthful.
I've stumbled on it more than once myself. So
Sure, we can do. She's the SFI.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that's any easier to say, but
I really appreciate you taking the time out. I've learned a lot about your busy schedule over the past couple weeks and talking, and we'll get into that a little bit as we go. I want to talk about, first of all, what the center does. What Children's Advocacy Center of East Central Illinois. That's a big question, and it was the first thing I asked you when we spoke originally.
And I think a lot of people don't have any idea about what a Children's Advocacy Center is or does, or maybe they don't even know they exist, or they confuse us with other organizations. There's a lot in the social service area, there's alphabet soup everywhere, right? And so what Children's Advocacy Centers do in general is we provide specialized interviewing for kids who are involved in a lot of different types of situations. A lot of the interviews that we're dealing with are kids that are involved in some sort of child abuse investigation, whether that's severe physical abuse or sexual abuse allegations. But we'll also interview kids who may have witnessed crimes or have been exposed to some sort of concern. Essentially, if some investigating agency, whether that's law enforcement, the Department of Children and Family Services, has an open investigation, has kids who need to be talked to, we're sort of the specialists in facilitating that conversation.
So tell me what that looks like in a setting. I've got a tour, and you've been in this new facility for less than a year.
Yeah, we moved in July, so last summer on a hot day.
And you have a lot of different space here that you haven't had before, and you're now starting to bring people back into the office, whereas before it was different.
Sure. I mean, obviously, like many agencies, we've had to navigate how to work safely for our staff, for our clients, while we navigate the pandemic. When we're in the office, today we're not wearing masks, but ordinarily we are wearing masks. We worked in teams for a really long time before our staff had access to vaccines. So we had like one team that was like an interviewer and an advocate, and another team. The goal essentially to keep that if one of our main interviewers was quarantined or fell ill, that we wouldn't have to shut down our whole operation, because we serve 10 counties. So
that's huge. Can you list them?
Not
to put you
no,
on
I can.
spot.
Yeah, right. So we're in Coles County. We also serve Clark, Cumberland, Edgar, Effingham, Fayette, Jasper, Moultrie, Shelby, and I skipped someone. Who did I skip? It'll come to Douglas.
Oh.
I tried to do them alphabetically, and I skipped over Douglas. I apologize, Douglas County friends. So we serve 10 counties, and we actually this is our main office, and then we operate a satellite interviewing facility in Effingham. It's actually located inside the Heartland Human Services building.
Yeah.
So we have a suite of offices there with a full interview setup. It's a little bit more bare bones than here, but have everything that we need for families to be comfortable, for us to do our interviews and record them the way we need to do, to take us on site to our more southern clients. And then we also have a satellite interview facility that's in Marshall, Illinois. It's located inside of the building that houses the Human Resources Center. So we're really fortunate to have a little bit more access, because with 10 counties, it's a big spread, and it's a big ask for families to travel. It's a big ask for our investigative partners to have to travel and be away from their jurisdictions too.
That's what I was going to ask. Do families from, say, Jasper come here, or Effingham? Do they travel to the places, or do you go to them?
So what we try to do is have the interview at the satellite location that is most convenient for the child and their family. That's kind of our motto from the get-go, is that the kids involved are the priority. We want to make the services that they're getting to be as comfortable and accessible for them and for their family as we possibly can. We recognize that even though we have 2 other locations, that some people are still having to drive, an hour maybe. I mean,
Sure.
It's still a haul if you're coming from Vandalia to Effingham. It's not right around
Sure.
the corner. So we have generous donors who help us out with gas cards, those kinds of things. So if transportation is an issue, we will find a way, whether that's utilizing, we've got rural mass transit that serves some of our areas. We have some resources, or a church might be willing to drive. We put our heads together if that's an issue.
And we'll talk about those resources too when we talk about your closet. It's more
For
than
sure.
a closet, it's a walk-in.
It is more than a closet,
Yeah.
yes.
So the phone call, say you get a phone call, could look at many different ways. Can you walk me through the process? Like, the families come in here, we're sitting in the family
Sure.
room, and how that looks.
Okay. So before a family ever walks in the door, some things have already happened. So anytime we're involved, there's going to be some sort of, I think I mentioned this before, but some sort of formal open investigation that involves law enforcement, DCFS, or those agencies working in partnership. And that's local, state, federal law enforcement. We work with, we've never fully counted, but I would say in the 10 counties, you're probably talking about close to 50 law enforcement agencies. The FBI will come use our facilities. A lot of times they bring their own interviewer. But we'll partner with anybody who needs the interview for their investigation. But we're not just like taking a call from a concerned family member and saying, hey, I'm worried about my granddaughter or my daughter, can you do an interview? We'll help get them to reporting, which I know we're going to talk about, so I won't jump into that.
Sure.
But so before a family ever walks through our front door, we will have been contacted by somebody on the investigation side. Hey, we had this case come in, there's some concerns, we have this kid or these children that need to have interviews. We work out what works for everybody's schedule. So we're coordinating, obviously, with the kid and family. We want to work around what's best for the kid. If they're school age, unfortunately, they probably may have to miss some of school because, but typically that's not any issue. But most of our interviews are taking place during the day. But we want to be sensitive. It's a young child who still takes a nap. Like, I don't want to try to interview a kid during their nap time. That doesn't set anybody up for success.
No.
Or if there's other things, we try to be sensitive to those things, or any special occasion. We don't want somebody to miss
A
something
birthday,
special at school.
yeah.
Oh yeah. No, we try not to do interviews on birthdays, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
But so all that's happening beforehand. Families are going to come in. They're going to be greeted by one of our staff members that day. Welcome to the center. That person that meets them we have 5 staff members, and somebody of those 5 will serve as what we refer to as a family advocate that day. And that person's going to be here in the family room where we're hanging out tonight with the family. They're going to do a little bit of paperwork. It's honestly pretty minimal. Everybody has their paperwork, but mostly it's how can we follow up with you, and then some demographic information that we need to report to our funding sources. Some just helpful information for them. There's a little survey for the caregivers to fill out, and older kids to fill out kind of about their experience, after things are done, to give us some feedback, help us do our best work. And during that time, our advocate's going to be helping to kind of calm any concerns. It's even just being involved in an investigation and having your child need to be interviewed, regardless of what's going on, is probably going to be stressful. Sometimes parents aren't fully aware of what is alleged to have happened, and that can certainly be anxiety producing.
Where they're learning about the case.
Right. I mean, there can be any number of reasons from an investigative standpoint that maybe not everything is known or can be shared at that point. So sometimes, parents are worried, is DCFS going to take my kid? Is somebody going to be arrested? Like, what's going to happen? They don't know.
And that's an important point that we talked about before the interview. Is that's a big concern. And a lot of times that what you're seeing, and we've interviewed several other agencies that deal with very similar things but very different things as well. It's not necessarily the case that you want to encourage parents to see something, say something, and
Sure.
and it's not just an end result that your children are going to be taken from you, and that's.
And what I would say is, in the majority of cases that we're working with families, those kids are with one or both of their parents, and they are not in care, wards of the state, whatever label you want to apply to that, and they don't become as a result of those investigations. Unfortunately, a lot of times, if there is abuse happening, it is being perpetrated by somebody who's known to the family, whether it's another family member or a friend, somebody that they know for sure. But, let's say it's, mom's boyfriend. If mom finds out about the abuse and contacts law enforcement, like, you found out, you
You're
did
doing
the right thing. And so we spend a lot of time helping parents understand, that is not DCFS's goal. So but that is a concern that sometimes happens. And,
Absolutely.
certainly there may be instances where that does happen, but I would say it's more the exception than the rule. And most of our kids are with their parents or another family member during the course of our interaction with them. But kids might be worried about that. And you don't know what a perpetrator may have said to a child. If you tell, DCFS is going to take you away.
That's a big thing that we've talked about in every single interview, be it with the agencies, the local support and service agencies, or with the law enforcement that we interviewed,
Right.
is that there's generally a significant amount of brainwashing done, will hurt your family,
Right.
you won't see your mom again, that sort of thing that happens way before that it comes out, which is, just makes it more difficult.
Sure.
Yeah.
But so, the advocate is just working to kind of answer any of those concerns and just help everybody relax. It's a new place. For the most part, we haven't met these families before. And that's, I think something that's important for people to know. Most of the time, kids are going to be interviewed once. They're going to have kind of one face-to-face interaction with their interviewer. We're going to have some ongoing contact by phone, following up, supporting family through whatever that's looking like moving forward. But it's not like the kid has been in and out of our center 10 times or something. If I'm doing an interview, most of the time I come out to the family room, I'm like, hi, I'm Robin. My job's to talk to kids. I get to talk to you today. I have a room down the hallway. I'm ready for you to come and talk to me. Are you ready to come with me? Kind of a thing. So.
And if we have time, we'll certainly pan around and give everyone a view, because it's so much fun. Like, you see us sitting on a couch, but around us we have bookshelves and coloring books and crayons and a whole separate room of toys and stuff. So you immediately walk in, and I just think of my kids. It's just, oh, well, this is fun. Like,
Yes.
I get dibs on the beanbag chair.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's a goal for our center to feel like when a kid walks in that it's a place for kids. And I will say our new space is, in some ways, like, we had a lot of cool murals and stuff painted in the old office. And in some ways, our new space is a little bit more grown-up feeling, but I think still, you see the toys right away. You see our reading area, and it feels very much friendly. There's colorful things. Obviously, what we're sitting at right now is like the least colorful part of the room. But yeah, so that's happening out here while the advocate's meeting with the family and the kids are playing and doing whatever they're doing. We're doing paperwork. Whoever's going to be interviewing is going to be in the back of the center, meeting with whoever's present from the investigative side, learning what's brought this kid here today. Like, why are we here? What kind of information do you need us to attempt to get? What do we think is going on? One thing I can tell you, I've done more than 900 interviews, and you walk into that room, like, kind of with, a loose idea of sort of what you think you're going to talk about, but you don't ever know exactly what a kid's going to tell you. And sometimes what's been reported is not accurate, or there's stuff that wasn't reported, or, so you don't ever know, and we certainly don't approach an interview with any kind of preconceived notion, but there is a little pre-meeting that happens, talk about information we need to know. Like, with really young kids, I like to know a little bit about their family, because sometimes, like, names and things, I'm not going to have a ton of time with a 3 or a 4-year-old, and so if I can be kind of prepared to know, like, who they're talking about a little bit, it can help me kind of get more to the meat of of what a child can tell me. With older kids, you know, they can come in and give me the whole rundown of their family tree, no problem.
Yeah, for sure. And there's so many different blended families. I'm a blended family. I mean, lots of my friends are blended families. There's so many dynamics. That's hard for my friends to keep track of,
For
you know,
sure.
let alone when you're sitting through who's on first game.
Yes, and I would say in my experience as an interviewer, kids are really good at explaining their own family, no matter how unique it is. I mean, it's their family. They live that every day.
Absolutely.
You know, oh, well, you know, I have a mom and a stepdad and, you know, and then I still see my old stepdad, you know, and they can explain. And I think one thing that sometimes gets complicated is if you have like same first names on people, you know, like maybe you have juniors, seniors, but it's amazing.
Yeah.
Kids do a really nice job of explaining that stuff. And that's certainly part of our job as an interviewer. Like if that's not clear, identity is important in our interviews. And so, you know, there's a big easel with like flip chart paper in the interview room. So, you know, we're gonna write names, you know, like kind of give me, okay, you said, you know, you have a mom and a stepdad. Tell me everybody at mom's house. And we're gonna kind of like draw them out, talk about the pets, like who's there. Do everybody at dad's house, you know, oh, you spend time at grandma's house. And then kids can kind of refer to that. So I find kids, even really young kids, are pretty good at explaining what's their normal family structure. But yes, we see all kinds of family dynamics and situations.
That, you know, to interject something that you brought up before the interview is what you do, you see everybody. There isn't a demographic that you don't touch. You know, it crosses all socioeconomical demographics. It crosses any kind of family dynamic demographics. There's no like design to it necessarily.
And I think when you're talking about, you know, child abuse, whether it's sex abuse or physical abuse, certainly, you know, it can happen to anybody in any family structure. So yeah, we do see a little bit of everything, and you know, perpetrators can be a variety of different people, and so I think that's probably one of the things people don't like to think about, that those things are happening in their communities, but we know, you know, statistically that they are. You know, we're interviewing more than 300 kids every year in those 10 counties, and we know that some kids are never going to tell about their abuse, and lots of kids wait, and that's what we call in our line of work a delayed disclosure. You know, most kids, it's not like something happened, they run right home and tell mom.
Right.
You know, it may be weeks, months, years before a child will come forward about abuse. Typically, that's probably more in the sexual abuse avenue. Our physical abuse cases oftentimes are more, you know, something has happened, you know, we know like there are injuries, we need to talk about how those injuries happened.
There's a more obvious
kind of a thing.
So in situations, you say you've been to visits with, you know, medical visits with kids and different things. How does that? Shall we move from the room and
Sure, we kind of it's hard because it all intersects, but so.
And that's a big part of the reason that we're here talking about this is because we want to clear up a lot of misconceptions about or truths. Speak to what you do. Yeah.
I think the biggest thing that, you know, to understand about when we're interviewing a child, we don't go into that room with a goal. And certainly not every interview has a disclosure. And that's because not every kid we talk to has been a victim of abuse. We also interview a lot of, you know, let's say something is alleged to have happened in a household. You know, we have maybe our main child of concern that we believe something has happened to. Yes, we're going to interview that child if they're interviewable. If there's other kids in that household, we're likely going to be interviewing them too. You know, we want to make sure, did something happen to them? You know, maybe they just haven't made an outcry, or maybe they observe something and they can tell us something that corroborates the statement of the child who did experience abuse. So sometimes those are kind of what we would refer to as like a risk interview, where there hasn't been a specific outcry, but they've been perhaps exposed to either the situation or the individual of concern. So we certainly don't enter into an interview like, I'm going to get this kid to tell me something happened to them, because we don't know. Our goal is to give the child an opportunity to share information that they have, and to do it in a way that investigatively, you know, our interview is part of the investigation. It's not all of it, it's one part. You know, law enforcement, DCFS, they're gonna go talk to people. You know, if a kid can tell us about, you know, well, so-and-so saw us when we were, you know, at the hotel, at the park, whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's go find that person. Can that person corroborate what the kid said? You know, did they see them? You know, well, I called my mom from such and such place. Okay, we can get a phone record. So lots of things kids tell us in an interview can be corroborated. I think there's this misconception that sex abuse cases are all one person's statements versus another. You know, the perpetrators, what they say happened versus the kid, what they say happened. Because most of the time there's not any witness. You know, it's not, there likely aren't pictures or images or recordings. I mean, sometimes there are, but most of the time it's a kid saying, this is what happened, and an adult saying, that's not what happened, this is what happened, kind of a thing.
Sure.
And so you get this concept of he said, she said, or whatever. But a child's statement, you know, if they tell us, you know, if they were someplace with the perpetrator and they tell us about, you know, something specific, you know, like, well, this thing was in the drawer. And if law enforcement can get a search warrant and go find that thing, you know, okay. So if everything the kid said is true and accurate, like, why would what they're saying happen not be?
Right.
Or, you know, if a perpetrator says, you know, no way was that kid ever in my house, but the kid can, like, tell me all about everything.
Your black and white cat? Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, those are things that as an interviewer, those are the kinds of details that our investigative partners, which are part of our larger team that we call the multidisciplinary team, or MDT for short. So I've already talked about law enforcement and DCFS. Additionally, on the MDT, we would talk about our state's attorneys. Ultimately, when law enforcement completes their investigation, that stuff's going to go to a state's attorney to evaluate if there is a crime, should it be charged, how do we move forward with that. We talked about mental health. You know, we're making referrals to agencies in our area. We work closely with several rape crisis organizations in our 10-county area to provide specialized support for victims in the sexual abuse area. We make referrals to other mental health agencies or private counseling agencies kind of as needed.
You have an in-house counselor.
We do have, we have a crisis counselor on staff. So we talked about that there's 5 of us, and the crisis counselor is one of those. And so she can do, you know, if we have somebody who, you know, really is having a hard time here, whether it's a caregiver or a child, you know, she can do, you know, kind of an emergency session right now. She does a lot of phone sessions. Obviously, with our area being large and certainly with the pandemic, like phone counseling is the thing. We also have set up to be able to do virtual counseling, but, you know, not all clients have access to reliable internet and all those kinds of things. So, you know, we kind of try to meet them however we can. Pre-pandemic life, she would be going out and meeting in communities, you know, setting up places at a library or church or, you know, a school, someplace kind of neutral, but without so much travel. So another thing we've had to kind of navigate in the pandemic world. And I lost my train of thought where we were at there. Help me.
Your
bring it back.
multidisciplinary
Oh,
team.
yes. And the last aspect that I haven't talked about, and that was kind of what you were asking about, is our medical partner. So we work closely with, she's actually a nurse practitioner who's part of our multidisciplinary team who has specialized training in the area of child abuse. And so there's a couple different medical aspects that can come into play. Sometimes kids are going to land in the ER. If something just happened, you know, if something happened an hour ago, yes, go to the ER. And, you know, ideally be seen by a sane nurse with pediatric specialty, or a doctor that there's specialized training for that, because it's different than other types of things. So if it's a very recent incident, or there's an injury, obviously ER is the right place to go. If we're talking about a delayed disclosure, there's really not a need. And this is probably an area that, you know, I think I always sort of say, you know, things always happen like in the middle of the night, right? Like something happens, it's like 2 a.m., everybody's tired, everybody's worried, and it's like, I'm just taking my kid to the ER because I just need somebody to tell me if something happened to them. Because I think there's a misconception that a medical professional can look at a child's body and know for sure if they were sexually abused. And unfortunately, that's not true. There's not a magic way to look at a kid's body and know for sure. And so if we're talking about a delayed disclosure, most of the time there's absolutely no reason to go to the ER. So what we do is after an interview, if a child has made a disclosure that meets kind of our standards for what needs medical follow-up, we make a referral for a non-acute exam to be done by Noelle, who's our nurse practitioner that we work most closely with. We have some other relationships with other practitioners that we can, work out to if we need to, or if they're distance-wise makes more sense.
Sure.
But those are pretty specialized exams, and you want them done the right way. And really, those exams, honestly, are about, yes, we want to make sure the kiddo's body is okay, check for any kind of infection or pregnancy or something that could be a byproduct of abuse. But a lot of it's about reassuring child, like, your body's okay. Nobody can look at you and know this happened to you. Kids think all kinds of things.
Oh, absolutely.
Parents think all kinds of things. And
I don't think that anyone's clear thinking in a trauma situation.
No.
They're just not
Right.
able to. It's fear.
And we can, I know a lot of these things. I've heard many of these things. I've attended a lot of trainings, but hearing somebody who has a medical background say, your kid is okay, everything is normal, your body's normal.
As moms, we can identify with that on just your
For
regular, it's just poison ivy. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And there may be other things that are going on with the kiddo's body that need checked out and, helped out, and those can all be addressed, but those exams are really non-invasive. They're very quick. It's kind of like having a checkup. She's going to listen to your heart, take your blood pressure, your temperature.
You also have somebody else to corroborate that event happening.
Right.
They spoke with the kid.
Yeah. And if there is something, we need to know.
Absolutely.
There certainly are cases where there is what we would call a medical finding, but it's pretty unusual. So a lot of that is just more about double checking, making sure kiddo's body is okay, those kinds of things. But, that is another part of our team and something we work closely with and that we talk about when we have our case reviews and those kinds of things.
One of the other multidisciplinary team.
Yeah. MDT for short.
MDT.
It's a mouthful also.
Is your state's attorney. You work with the state's attorney, and you also, as we've talked, I consider myself a busy woman, but I think that you beat me. And
Not a contest.
It's not a contest.
Not a contest.
But I'm amazed at the amount of things, and this isn't just to say that you weren't busy before pre-pandemic. Can you give us a look at what that looks like once you are in the court setting?
Sure. So, if a child does come in and makes a disclosure of abuse, as I mentioned, law enforcement's going to, complete their investigation. All that's kind of it's packaged up and forwarded to the state's attorney to review to determine, if there's something needed to be charged. And part of our role as a CAC is to advocate, when there should, this is a case that, this one you should look at, we have a strong case, and to help advocate for charges where that's appropriate, and to help make sure that state's attorney's offices are, staying up on changes in the law, those kinds of things. They have to know all of this stuff, and we kind of focus in on this one area. So if a case ultimately is determined to be charged, state's attorney decides to charge. So our role then, we're going to stay with that family. One of our staff members who had the chance to meet on his way out, his role is that he is our MDT coordinator and our judicial advocate. So he really focuses in on following along the variety of cases that we have that are traveling through the court system in all 10 of the counties that we serve. Everybody kind of has their own pace. I will say during COVID, court has really mostly just not been happening. There haven't been a lot of trials. There's always kind of a backlog, felony cases, which most of what we're talking about would be charged at the felony level, are pretty slow. Pre-pandemic, I probably would have told a family, if it's getting charged, you're probably looking at a year or more before you're going to see resolution in the court setting. So you can imagine now we have a backlog that existed before, a backlog of, news, because we've been interviewing. It's been steady. Our numbers really haven't been significantly lower during the pandemic as far as interviews.
Noticed an increase at all? I wonder that because I asked about everybody's been in lockdown or at home,
right,
more so, and I think that maybe we don't know now.
I think that would probably be my answer. In general, in our field, is there a concern that it's likely that child abuse has probably increased during the pandemic? Sure. Things that we know make child abuse likely to happen are happening. People are under more stress. People are stuck at home. People might be out of work. If abuse was happening before, kids maybe were stuck at home. If that abuser was in the home, now you're at home, you're not going to school. I think certainly physical abuse is a worry. Maybe going to school was a thing that kept people from some of that, somebody's going to see you at school, so I need to be careful not to put marks on you kind of a thing. But if, you're just zooming, they only see your face, or maybe you have your camera off. So I think certainly in our field on the whole, there's a concern about what is happening during the pandemic.
And it's not just you, it's across the board in, sexual violence,
sure,
and domestic violence, not just,
right.
Yeah.
We know, you've seen the statistics, people are using more alcohol, people are, and all of those things play into child abuse of all types. And so I think it's a worry. Do we have the data to really know? No. Have we been busy lately? Yes, but it's really hard to know. There are ebbs and flows to what we do. What we're seeing right now that's making us extra busy is that the courts are starting to open up. And so we're having more trials starting to proceed, more court appearances in person versus doing Zoom or what have you. And, like last week I was under subpoena for a trial, and you don't know exactly how long a trial is going to last. It was in another county, so I had to travel. So I can't really book myself to be doing interviews during that time. So it kind of affects our schedule overall. And when you only have a staff of 5, just taking 1 or 2 people out of the mix can really affect what we're able to do work-wise.
Certainly.
And obviously we have all the other ongoing things. We need to be touching base with families. We have paperwork and things that we have to do and turn in, at certain time periods. So we do stay busy, but when cases are in court, like I said, our judicial advocate, he's going to follow that along, be relating information to family members. There's a lot of things that happen along the way in that, year or whatever.
Sure.
There are a lot of status hearings where basically the lawyers come to court, the accused person comes to court, and, the judge is like, how are things proceeding? Do we need to do anything? No, okay, we'll set it over for a month or 2 from now. And these kind of quick just check-ins to make sure things are happening. Does a family really need to travel to court for that? No, but do they need to, they can, and certainly that's their right to be there if they want to. But, some of them would be traveling a great distance. And so.
And that may be more damaging to them than for somebody
it
like
can
yourself
certainly
to
be
be
stressful.
This one isn't something you have to be unless you want to be. This is
Right.
what's going to be covered.
And that's so unique to every family. We have families who want to be there, and that's empowering to them to attend and be in the know. And some of them are like, only call me if something really big is happening. I don't need to know about all the little stuff that's happening. So we try to tailor what we're doing to a family's needs. Ultimately, if a case goes to court in Illinois, our interviews can be admissible sometimes. So, excuse me, for kids that are under 13, there's an exception for the hearsay that would normally not be allowed to court. There are certain motions that can be done before a trial that can enable the interview to actually come in as evidence, which can be really nice for a number of reasons. For one, let's say a case has been sitting around for 2 years. We interviewed a 9-year-old, now they're 12, almost 13. Kid has changed. Kids cope with their abuse differently. Sometimes that can be something that maybe is hard for a jury to understand how a kid's doing, and we want the jury to understand what that kid looked like the day that they were talking to us. So it's nice for them to be able to see that, little kids, maybe they've moved on, they might not remember. So it's part of it, and kids still have to appear. And that's probably one of the biggest misconceptions is the interview can't stand in place for a child's testimony. Even a little 3-year-old has to appear in court if we're moving forward with a case. And that's something that people are sometimes surprised to learn. And well, why do you do the interview then? But it helps inform the process, and there are ways that can help if the child has trouble with their testimony, kind of thing on the stand in person. But so we go and testify at various types of motions for those criminal proceedings. Sometimes we get pulled into family court things. But it's more typically on the criminal, like the prosecution side.
Mm-hmm. That's a lot.
Yeah,
A lot of moving parts.
there are, and you know, when you think about exponentially all of the clients that we have coming through here, all of the counties, all of the players, it's a lot of people. And you know, when you build a relationship and somebody retires, or you know, the state's attorney becomes a judge and you have a new state's attorney, I mean, they're about the time you get everything kind of, you know, moving along and you're like, oh, we really got this county moving, you know, a piece gets moved or changed or a pandemic happens. I mean,
Who would have thought?
right.
Yeah.
So I think the biggest thing for us and for all social service agencies is just that we have to be flexible and try to meet our clients wherever they are and provide them what they need. And certainly our 5-person agency doesn't do that alone. And I know we wanted to talk about like who we partner with. We make a ton of referrals. Like we can't be everywhere in 10 counties with 5 of us. It's not possible.
No.
You know, and we have hundreds of clients open in our caseload. Like
That's part of what the task force, the 5770 task force wants to do too, is be able to make bigger connections, so that we can talk to you and say, oh, well, you work with, there's so many layers of human trafficking, and that's
Right.
not necessarily what we're talking about today,
right.
but it sometimes starts.
It can be, and certainly we have occasionally, you know, do have trafficking concerns come across our way. The other thing we know is that children who are victims of sex abuse can be more likely to become victims of trafficking, unfortunately. So sometimes, you know, obviously our goal is to stabilize these families and to help these kids. Now I've got a tickle going. Because we want to limit the additional trauma moving forward. So
Absolutely.
that's certainly a concern that we look at, and just helping to stabilize kids and give them resources moving forward.
Absolutely. So I know we had an interview with Jill Wright from SAFE, and you guys work with SAFE.
We do. I know Jill well.
I remember SAFE. I can't remember the acronym.
The acronym, oh, you're going to put me on the spot.
And then you also mentioned that you work with, and the referral for me to meet you was through Heartland Human Services.
Right.
And they're fantastic, both places located in Effingham.
Mm-hmm.
I hope to be doing an interview with Swan.
Okay.
You may not deal with Swan so much.
Not
They're
a ton, but we certainly
adults.
do. Yep.
Who else do you work with?
I already mentioned, our mental health agencies are, you know, which of course Heartland would be one of those. Each of our counties, you know, has their own unique set, and that's probably the biggest challenge for us working with so many counties, is knowing who the right resources are for each family. And so a lot of times, you know, our goal is just not to make the family have to chase it down.
Yeah.
So like if they need XYZ resource, okay, let me work on that. You know, I'm going to call you back. Let me work on this. I'll call you by the end of the day with some resources. You know, here are, you know, you need counseling. You know, here are these agencies. You know, they don't have a wait list. Here's how to get a hold of them. You know, housing. Okay, who can help with housing? You know, and we try to do the legwork because the process is overwhelming, right? And they're already overwhelmed and they're worried, and we want them to focus on taking care of their kids, taking care of themselves so they can take care of their kids.
Absolutely.
You know, this can uncork a lot of things in a family. Unfortunately, a lot of our parents maybe have experienced abuse themselves, and they haven't maybe dealt with that. And now walking along this path with your child or, you know, another, you know, relative, somebody you're taking care of, you know, can be kind of throw you back into a trauma place. And if you haven't handled that, you may not be as well equipped to help this kid navigate things. And so we spend a lot of resources helping to stabilize the caregivers, because stable caregivers help stabilize kids.
Absolutely.
So those kinds of resources are important. I mean, you name it, we've worked with it. A church, I mean, I remember a family I helped work with, their electrical provider, because they were way behind on their bill and like their stuff was going to get shut down. And so, you know, we just kind of helped get them some relief, you know, whatever
and
it is.
you do a lot of that. You know, you've mentioned this a couple times throughout this interview, is you help with gas cards and you've helped with electric bills, and you have a room filled with supplies, and I want to make sure that everybody knows that it exists, so that if there's a need for a toothbrush or cleaning supplies with the families, that, you know, maybe their kids are going to stay somewhere for a little bit, and don't have a blanket.
Or don't have any toys. I mean, little
That's
kids
huge.
who get uprooted, like, I mean, something as simple as having a cuddly thing or a monster truck to, whatever. It's nothing huge or, just a clean change of clothes. I mean, heck, a kid could wet their pants when they're here. I mean, accidents happen, like
Absolutely.
they don't have the diaper bag with them, whatever. So we try to have a little bit on hand. We lovingly call it our care closet. Before we moved into this space, it really was like a little tiny closet, and it was very full. We were always kind of like puzzle piecing stuff in there. It's been our dream to have kind of a more formal space. It's neat. You saw it. It's kind of piles right now. We're getting ready to get some more shelving and kind of organize it a little bit more store style, so that hopefully we can just bring a family in there. Hey, are there things here that you need? Or if we know a family has a specific need, can we gather stuff up, drop it at their door? Whatever we need to do. Those items almost exclusively are donated items. So we've had either people who had connections. We just had a really generous donation of toothpaste and toothbrushes that came through Heartland Dental and some connections in the Effingham area. We have a sorority we work with closely from EIU's campus who, they do a great job of like collecting up like toiletries and things and, helping us bag those up, just little simple things. We've had school supply drives before. We have a really nice set of fleece blankets that were donated to us from another blanket drive that was like so successful they had too many. And the other thing we do is if we end up with too much stuff, we work really closely with other social service agencies, and so I'll give them a call. Hey, we have an influx of deodorant right now. Like, can you guys take some, or do you know somebody who can? Because we all have to look out, for each other. So,
Absolutely.
We just try to help out where we can. And like I said, every family is unique, and we just try to meet them with what's going on and what their needs are.
I love the fact that when I asked, who else do you partner with? And you're like, anyone and everyone.
All the people.
All the people. And I think that that's an important thing to think about. And I'm hoping that as we move through different interviews that we can collect quite a bit of information to say, there's who does somebody call for
Right.
X, Y, and Z? How does that take place? What does that look like?
Yeah.
We've done a really good job here on time.
We have. Look
We
at
have.
us.
Yeah.
But there's still so much more.
There's still so much. There's still so much more. One of the things that I wanted to ask before we closed was misconceptions. What are you not?
What are we not? Well, I think a lot of people think that we are DCFS or we are law enforcement. We are an independent agency. We partner with those groups and we're not, operating without them. But I always sort of jokingly say, like, we're Switzerland, we can't take your kids, we can't arrest, they don't give me a badge and a gun. I'm just the social worker who talks to kids. So I think sometimes just like the roles and how that all fits together is confusing. And I mean, at the end of the day, when you're in the middle of a crisis, like it's all just alphabet soup. Like you're all just social working people. Like, oh, are you CASA? Are you, this, you name the alphabet soup, like.
And it is an alphabet soup.
And
it's a lot of acronyms.
And it is, and there's a lot of similarities and crossover, and some, we kind of do the same thing here, but not here. So I think that's probably the biggest confusion that just happens. And lots of people have no idea who we are because they've never interacted. And I always, people, oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't know that existed. And I always kind of smile and say, honestly, it's a blessing to you that you don't know that CACs exist, because it probably means you don't know directly about somebody who's had to use our services.
Absolutely.
Because most people, until they are crossing our path for some reason or have cause to know about us, don't know. But here we are.
Yeah, but here we are. Yeah, I think it's important to interview people in different areas of service and agencies, especially advocates. That's kind of what we do for the task force. Is
Right.
We just want to provide advocacy and engage people. A lot of people who want to help. How do we help? How does somebody people can donate new items.
Right. Yep. We certainly always accept donations. Certainly financial donations, always welcome. We're primarily grant funded. Our grants are pretty stable, but they're grants. And
They're
for
grants.
people who know about grants, you know, like there's certain requirement to match some of that funding. You know, there are certain things that, you know, our grants right now will not cover gas cards. So that's something that has to come from unrestricted money or be donated directly. So there are things we'd like to have on hand that maybe we can't purchase that way. So that's certainly a way somebody can help. You know, we're always open to taking donations of new items that can be used in the care closet. You know, liking our Facebook page. Like, as corny as that sounds, but you know, we try to share some information. Right now, April is National Child Abuse Prevention Month.
Absolutely.
So I've scheduled a bunch of posts on our Facebook page to talk about, you know, how you can report, you know, statistics, things that people don't know, just to be educated and to know, you know, that if you hear a child talk about, you know, if you hear something that's concerning, listen and, you know, hear the child and pass that information to somebody who can help, you know, and it's scary and people, you know, are worried. They don't want to get somebody get arrested. Is somebody gonna get mad at me? Are they gonna know that I reported? I think reporting is scary. Like, what happens when I report? Like, what happens if I call the police? Do I dial 911? Like, what do I do?
Good point.
So, certainly if a child's like in immediate danger, like right now, yes.
911.
Dial 911,
Yeah.
please. If there's a concern of abuse to a child, DCFS in Illinois has a hotline, 1-8, well, I'm not gonna, it's 25 abuse. It's 888-25 abuse. I'm like, I haven't spat it out in a while.
And we'll put this all in the notes.
So DCFS is going to take reports that involve somebody who is in a position of care to the child or shares a household with the child. But there are some kinds of cases that DCFS doesn't deal with. So in that case, you need to contact law enforcement. In the state of Illinois, you should be able to walk into your local law enforcement agency and make a report of abuse, and they should take it and forward it to the appropriate law enforcement agency if you're not in that jurisdiction. Ideally, if you can get to where the incident happened, that's the best, or give them a call, those kinds of things. And that's kind of how you start. And we get calls probably at least once a week from somebody who's concerned, you know, what do I do? You know, this is what's going on. Can you help me? Can you talk to this kid? You know, what do I do? And we kind of help steer towards, you know, here's what you can do. You know, like, no, we can't just schedule an interview. There needs to be an open investigation. Reporting to DCFS is kind of interesting. So a lot of people don't know that the hotline is actually staffed by real life social workers. You know, it's not like a random phone bank of people that are like telemarketers. They're real life social workers. I think right now they're working from home, but they usually are like all, I think in Springfield, you know, and they're little taking calls. They work 24/7. They have a huge call volume sometimes. So sometimes when you call, they'll actually say, you know, if it's not like an emergency situation, you know, can we get your information and can somebody call you back, you know, when the call volume is lower. And like I said, they work 24/7. So a tip I always give to people, if you're going to make a hotline report, is that if there's a time you don't want them to call, make sure you let them know. Like, if you don't want them to call you between midnight and 8, let them know, because otherwise they might call you at 3 in the morning if that's when they have time. And just have as much information as you can. They're going to ask you a lot of questions. You might not have all that information, but obviously names are important, locations are important, as much information as you can share about what is of concern. And then they're going to tell you if they're able to take that report or not. If they're not able to take the report, they might let you know that it's something that should be directed to law enforcement. Or you can just make that next leap if you still have a concern and you feel like those concerns aren't being met. The biggest thing to know is it is anonymous when you report. I mean, yes, they're going to ask for your information, and the person who's assigned that case, ultimately, if they take it, may reach out to you for some follow-up information, but they cannot tell the people that you are making an allegation against that, you know, like if you called in a report on me, they're not going to say, Robin, Amber called in a report on you. But the other thing I'll tell people is, if you know something that's unique, that those people know only you know, and that's in what you report, people are not foolish, you know, they may be able to figure out, or they may assume, sometimes, I mean, they assume wrong probably sometimes, but even we generally don't know who has made a report when we're doing an interview. You know, sometimes they're mandated reporters, you can kind of figure that out, you know, because of context or, you know, what have you. Obviously, We get lots of reports from school,
Mm-hmm.
those kinds of things, medical providers who see something concerning. But a lot of calls that come from the hotline are from a concerned family member or a neighbor
I
or,
was just gonna say, that's
those
what I
kinds of
hear a
things.
lot of, just as I'm talking about the interviews that I've conducted, people say, you know, I have a neighbor, and it's interesting, like, I feel that at some point we're all in some aspect of, to be open with your eyes and open with your ears, and the theme has been, see something, say something.
right.
If it gives you that, like, ooh, that's, something's not right
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. I mean, I called the hotline once. I saw, it was sort of like, looked like a domestic situation. I was not at work. I was actually out to eat. Kind of a domestic situation happening in the parking lot between some adults, but there was a young kid kind of getting dragged along, and I was worried. And I actually called law enforcement initially, but it ended up ending up with DCFS, and I had some follow-up totally outside of my work capacity. It's not scary per se, but I think people worry about all the what ifs, and you know, they're gonna ask me stuff I don't know. Tell them what you do know. And you don't ever know what they already know. And that's the thing that I oftentimes say
That's important.
is, you know, there could already be something going on. They might already be aware of a family or of a situation, and you might have some piece of information that's not already known. So I would rather see, you know, 100 calls made about something that turns out just to be a misunderstanding than for somebody who sees something of concern and doesn't make the report and abuse continues. You know, the investigation process, it's not always successful. It doesn't always stop what's going on. You know, there's not always enough, or, you know, a kid might not be ready to tell. You know, there's all kinds of things that happen. You know, we certainly work within a system that's challenging and has issues, and it's complicated. It's real people. It's messy.
Yeah.
But if you see something of concern, or a child tells you of something that sounds concerning, I mean,
Make that call.
I think it's better off to make the call, you know, to share that information, and not to assume that somebody else is making the call.
And you know, I think that, and I'll kind of close up with this statement, is that when we do that, when we see something and we say something, hopefully we all have to look for new jobs one day, because we end this.
Right? I would gladly go do something else if there was no child abuse anywhere. No problem.
And from what I've noted, you sound so great at your position.
Thanks.
We've had a lot of time to talk before this interview, so it's just like, it's nice to see the space and the structure of how things go, but
Yeah.
also like, it'd be nice if you and I had the opportunity where this wasn't an issue and we could
Just get coffee and talk about something else.
or be the barista, right?
Right.
I can't thank you enough for taking the time out and explaining your jobs, and what the center does. I'm gonna put all the information, how they can contact you or who they can contact,
For sure.
down in the comments. Children's Advocacy Center, East Central Illinois, and thank you, Robin.
Yeah, thank you.
Really
We
appreciate
always love just the chance to share about who we are and what we do, because like I said, a lot of people don't know. And you know, one more person knowing about who we are, if that might help them or help a child, you know, that's what we're here for.
Absolutely. Thanks for everybody who's been watching tonight, and we'll be posting another. This will actually be up for viewing for the remainder of our Facebook page. It'll be stored in our videos. There'll be information in the details and comments, and we'll try to get back with anyone that watches it later and asks a question.
Definitely.
I have your contact information.
Yeah, and I can watch the comments and follow up too.
Yeah. Thanks so much.